So, in my most recent podcast episodes, talking about the sex hormones, specifically testosterone, IGF-1, and HGH, and their impacts on insulin resistance, insulin sensitivity, and beta cell health, we learned a lot about the relationship that these growth hormones have with how our body uses insulin, and vice versa, how our insulin levels are impacting the effectiveness of our growth hormones. And all of this talk about the relationship between insulin and testosterone got people thinking about PCOS. Polycystic ovarian syndrome is on the rise now in the female population, and it's largely believed to be rooted in insulin resistance. And I think I found out why. And it's rooted in testosterone's impact on hepcidin, which is a master regulator of iron homeostasis in cells. It basically is what controls the lever of what lets iron into the cell and lets iron out of the cell. And if you're familiar at all with my content, you know the dangers of mismanaged iron, both from a over retention standpoint of having all the iron in the cell and none of it in circulation, as well as the over circulation part where everything is left out in the open without actually retaining things in the cell for it to use. And in my most recent blog post on my personal site, I went into the connections between testosterone, estrogen, iron metabolism, and insulin resistance. Because honestly, I didn't really know a lot about PCOS, mainly because I don't have any ovaries. But it turns out that PCOS is largely tied to excess testosterone in the female body, which probably has something to do with the enzyme aromatase, which is what converts testosterone to estrogen. And there's a whole slew of nutritional, environmental, and stress-related things that cost you your aromatase activity. But when we look at testosterone in its relationship to hepcidin and its ability to facilitate growth, because as we talked about in this episode, more testosterone leads to more insulin in the name of being anabolic and growing. But it turns out the opposite is true in the female body. All of the things that testosterone is celebrated for in the male body, increased lean muscle mass, increased insulin sensitivity, a decreased belly fat, actually does the opposite thing for women. It increases visceral fat and causes insulin resistance. And it has everything to do with that hormonal balance. When females have the correct ratios of estrogen to testosterone, that estrogen level is the determining factor for the lean muscle mass, the correct body composition and fat deposits, and insulin sensitivity. But when I was looking into all of this, I was thinking in terms of iron storage and iron accumulation. And if testosterone has this seemingly positive impact on iron circulation in men, why would it be different for women? And it turns out that there are two extremes on the iron metabolism spectrum. One is caused by an unregulated amount of hepcidin. Too much hepcidin means that iron is getting locked inside the cell where it starts to fester and oxidize all of the things within that cell. And this overaccumulation of iron in the cell where it's kept out of circulation can actually lead to false positive readings for anemia. But if too much hepcidin is the problem for iron retention, why would women who have too much testosterone and thus much lower hepcidin, why would they be experiencing the same inflammatory issues typically associated with iron overload? Because they're operating on the opposite end of the iron spectrum. They have an overcirculation of iron and they aren't able to retain any of it. So if you don't have any hepcidin and you have too much testosterone, you're absorbing a ton of iron in your gut where it's brought into the bloodstream, but it isn't able to be distributed anywhere. And with too much iron in circulation, it starts to accumulate in the iron processing organs, the liver, the gut, the heart, and the endocrine organs like the pancreas. So an imbalance in either direction leads to the same outcomes, but via different mechanisms. Men, which I would argue in today's society are systemically low in testosterone, are over retaining iron in the cell where it's locked in and it can't be used properly. It's leading to oxidation, which is leading to inflammation, which is costing us our insulin sensitivity. Women with too much testosterone and no hepcidin is just an iron absorption mess where it's being distributed but not being used. And it's just accumulating in these organs where they are oxidizing, causing inflammation, and costing us our insulin sensitivity. So PCOS is purple, hypogonadism or low testosterone is in green. Too little testosterone is leading to too much estrogen for males, and not enough estrogen for women is leading to too much testosterone for them. But they're both leading to the exact same levels of iron dysregulation, inflammation, and insulin resistance. And for women, this high testosterone, inflammation, and insulin resistance leads to a feedback loop. So you've got high testosterone, which is leading to an impacted metabolism, which is impacting your fat storage, where instead of on your hips and in your breasts, it's now going to your belly. And belly fat tends to store a lot more toxins, which leads to more inflammation. This inflammation is impacting your insulin sensitivity, which is causing more insulin resistance. This insulin resistance is causing high insulin levels. And if you remember from episode 48 of Diabetics for Diabetics Radio, more insulin causes more testosterone, and the cycle begins anew. And for women experiencing PCOS, there's a whole slew of things that you can be doing to reinvigorate your body's aromatase activity, which is going to increase the conversion of testosterone to estrogen. The more estrogen you have and the more improved the balance between your estrogen and testosterone, the better your insulin sensitivity becomes, the less inflammation you experience, and this loop starts to slow down. And there is more to this relationship. It warrants a lot more attention in these videos on TikTok as well as on my YouTube. Subscribe and follow to keep learning more.